Jaime stood in his tent and began to remove his armor. The fighting was done, and the rebellion had been quashed. Why the Ironborn had thought they could match the combined forces of most of the Seven Kingdoms was a mystery to him. Did they really think that Robert's rule was that fragile? Did they not understand that with Stark and Arryn, Robert controlled 3 kingdoms, and with Cersei as his wife that gave him a 4th? Even if the Reach didn't join in, which they had, that alone was surely too many for a pile of rocks to handle. His father may have held back during Robert's rebellion, but he'd never hold back with his blood on the throne. Then just to poke the lion even more, they decided it was a good idea to attack Lannisport. Were they really that dumb? Evidently so, as now Balon Greyjoy sits a broken throne with 2 of his sons dead and the other to be a hostage to his good behavior. No doubt Robert would give that dubious honor to Stark, Jaime thought bitterly. Jaime had felt alive in the carnage of the fighting. It was the only thing that actually did make him feel anything since that day in the Red Keep. He had failed his prince that day, and no matter what he did since, that failure always kept coming back to him. "Look after my family, Jaime. Things will change when I return," Rhaegar had said. But Rhaegar hadn't returned, and Jaime could have never known that his father would sink so low. Before his thoughts could get the better of him once again, he was interrupted by a boy at his tent.
"Sir Jaime, the king wishes to speak to you,"
the boy said nervously. "Very well. I'll be there presently," Jaime replied. As he entered the king's tent, he could tell that this was no ordinary meeting. Eddard Stark sat there with the king, his usual serious expression showing on his long face. Wait, what was that look? Was that pity? Who the hell does he think he is to pity me? Jaime thought as he looked at the man. Oh! His anger threatened to rise, but before he could say anything, the king spoke very quietly and very unlike the jovial or even the angry Robert that he was used to. "There have been bad tidings from Harlow. I know no other way to say this other than to say it. Your father, he fell. Sir Jaime, he's gone," Robert said as he looked at him. The rest of the conversation had been a blur, and he wasn't sure if he heard anything after the news about his father. Tywin Lannister, the Lord of Casterly Rock, the Lion of Lannisport, fallen to a damn Ironborn Reaver. Surely this was wrong? Surely the messenger had been mistaken? Jaime clutched his chest, his breathing erratic, and then he fell down onto the ground and looked up to see Ned Stark above him offering him a hand. He brushed it away and forced himself to his feet, and as he turned to leave the tent, the king began to speak. "We need to," Robert began. "Not now, your grace," Stark said angrily, and for the first time, Jaime actually felt something other than contempt for the man. Later, as he sat in his tent, he felt more composed, or as much as he would be this day. He drank so many cups of water since he'd been told the news that he could now feel the results pushing against his bladder. So he walked outside to the nearest empty space and relieved the pressure, each drop making him more relaxed. He laughed at the absurdity of it all. Here he was pissing against the wind while his father lay dead miles away. What a waste, he thought as he placed his manhood back in his breeches. Heading back to his tent, the realization began to dawn on him. His father was gone, and yet where there should be sadness, he felt only relief. Oh, for sure there was pain mixed in there also, but surprisingly, the overriding emotion wasn't what it should have been. His father had been a monster. The events of the rebellion had proved that. And so Jaime barely mourned the man. Instead, it was the monster he thought of. The body was covered in blood, and the red Lannister banner covering it couldn't hide it all, but it was the 2 others that his eyes were focused on. Smaller, and yet equally blood-spattered children. They were only children. Jaime stopped, and the entire contents of his stomach emptied against the ground, though luckily he hadn't really eaten since he had heard the news of his father's death. As he reached his tent, the same small boy was standing there, no doubt bearing another message from the king.
"Sir Jaime,"
the boy began nervously. "Let me guess. The king wishes my presence once again. Very well, lead the way, young man," he said as he smiled at the boy, and they began to walk towards the king's tent. As before, when he entered, Ned Stark was again sitting to the right of the king, but the look in his eyes was different this time. What was it? Hope? No, it wasn't hope. Relief. Was it relief? No, not that either. Whatever it was, Jaime didn't get the time to figure it out as once again the king began to speak to him. "Ha, Sir Jaime, "It's good to see you're feeling better," the king said, smiling at him. Feeling better? Was he a moron? Did he think you were sick? His father had been killed, and this was the best this idiot could come up with as a greeting. Jaime noticed that even Stark was looking at him incredulously as Robert continued to speak. "We have much to discuss, Casterly Rock, for one, and we shall need a new Warden of the West." "It seems your time in my Kingsguard is at an end, Sir Jaime," Robert said, and Jaime felt his breath catch in his throat at the thoughts of what that could mean. The road to Winterfell was rough, and the terrain dreary, but Jaime found that he didn't mind either of those things. He actually quite liked the peacefulness and the empty spaces of the north. Besides, compared to the grey waste that was the Iron Islands, anything was an improvement. It had been less than 2 moons since his life had changed irrevocably, and he was still coming to terms with the new reality he found himself in. He probably should have headed home with the rest of the Westerland's forces, considering he was their new warden. But the thoughts of having to see his father's body and the inevitable looks he'd have faced from the Lords of the West was something he wasn't ready for just yet. So, to Winterfell, it was that he found himself heading. He'd been surprised when Stark had asked if he wished to accompany the king, surprised even more when, for some reason, he had agreed. "Thank you, Lord Stark. I think I will," he said, and he enjoyed the stunned expression on the wolf's face. They were to stay in Winterfell for only a short time, Jaime thinking that it would be a boon to Stark having the king in his keep, or at least the man would see it as such. From there, it was on to White Harbor and home, and once there, his father's body was to be laid to rest in the Hall of Heroes beside his forefathers. He had already written to Tyrion to explain what had happened, telling his brother that he would return soon and that he was sorry that he couldn't come back more quickly. He could have, of course, but for some reason, he wished to go to Winterfell. "What a strange world we live in," he said aloud, and to the bemusement of the 2 guards that were riding nearest to him. As they crested a hill, the keep came into view. It was large and grey, but still very impressive. The walls and towers looked ancient but sturdy, and it would take a lot to see this keep fall, Jaime thought. He looked to the front of the procession to see Stark and the king laughing and joking with one another. "Just kiss already," he thought as a smile appeared on his face. As they entered the castle, he saw what must have been every single resident awaiting their liege lord and king, and almost as one they dropped to their knees. "Winterfell is yours, my lord, and yours, your grace," the young man said, stumbling over his words. He looked as uncomfortable as could be, and the long, serious face of the Starks was clearly evident, marking him out as Stark's brother or so Jaime believed. Don't these people ever smile? Jaime thought, before the man who had spoken then showed that he actually could. "Benjen, it's good to see you, brother." Jaime heard Stark say, and he watched as the 2 brothers embraced, his thoughts going to his own little brother who was alone in Casterly Rock, and again Jaime promised himself he'd see Tyrion soon. "Rise, all of you, and welcome your lord home. We dealt the squids a mighty defeat, and your lord was at the very heart of it," the king said, his voice booming across the courtyard. He looked on as the king then moved to a woman who was torn between looking at him and at Stark. The lady was the latter's wife, obviously, pretty enough for a trout, Jaime thought as he looked at the exchange between the woman and the king. "Cat, you look as beautiful as ever," Robert said, and the tall, auburn-headed woman blushed as the king kissed her hand. "And this must be your boy. A fine warden of the north he'll make one day, won't you, lad?" the king said as he brushed his hand on the shoulder of a young, auburn-headed boy, while his mother looked on proudly. "Your grace, my lord, perhaps we should take this inside. The weather seems about to turn," the lady said as she turned to the small little girl beside her. She, too, was auburn-headed like her mother.
"Sansa, won't you say hello to your father?"
Stark's wife said, and the girl shyly looked up her father before yelping in joy as Stark pulled her up and swung her around. A little girl's laughter rang out around the courtyard, and once again Jaime was in place he wished not to be. "Where's Balerion, princess?" "He's hiding, father." "Oh, shall we find him then?" "No, father, no tickles." He felt the tears welling in his eyes, and so he quickly turned around and walked to his horse, hoping that no one had seen his face as he did so. Later, as he was escorted to his room, Jaime noticed a small, dark-haired boy swinging a sword against a straw dummy. His form was terrible, but the strength he was showing was surprising. though he quickly realized that the boy was angry and was taking it out on the nearest available object. "Keep your chin up, boy," Jaime said, and for a second he thought he saw purple in the boy's eyes. But it was brief, and he felt he was mistaken, as instead when he looked again it was a grey-eyed boy that looked back at him. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean any offense," the boy said as he dropped the wooden sword and sloped off towards the stables. "Don't worry, lad. None was given," Jaime said, but the boy was already out of sight. The feast that night was a dull affair. The Northerners had a different way of feasting than those in the South, and the king was in his usual boisterous mood. Robert, as always, was manhandling serving girls and getting drunker by the second. The only satisfaction that Jaime got was in seeing Stark's disapproval now aimed at someone other than him. That, and seeing his wife sitting beside him with a thunderous look on her face. Surprisingly, though, it didn't seem to be the king's behavior that was causing that look. Instead, it was focused on something at the back of the hall, or more precisely, someone. The boy from earlier sat there amongst what appeared to be the servants and guards. He was laughing at something one of them was saying when he looked to the high table. As soon as he did so, the smile stopped, and a look of seriousness that stirred something in Jaime quickly took over his features instead. Where have I seen that look before? Who is this boy? Jaime thought, and so he decided to look more closely at the lad, only for a loud bang at the front of the hall to grab his and everyone else's attention. "Well, help me, damn you," Robert said angrily, and both Trant and Blount moved quickly to pick the drunken king up from the floor. These were his former sworn brothers, and this is what the King's Guard had become, little more than arse-wipers to a drunken king. Jaime turned his attention from the fat oaf to search for the boy once again, only to find his seat empty. Where had he gone? He wondered. And so he got up from his seat and left in search of him, as his curiosity got the better of him. It didn't take too long to find him, as there he was once again with his sword in his hand and beating the hell out of a new straw dummy. "Your form is terrible," Jaime said as the boy turned to face him. "Sir, the boy stuttered, and so he smiled, trying to put him at ease. "Lord Jaime Lannister," he said, and the boy frowned when he heard his name. "Damn it," Jaime thought, and then he shrugged as he spoke again. "Would you like some pointers, lad?" he asked, and finally received a shy smile from the boy. "Yes, sir, I mean my lord," the boy said eagerly. For the next couple of hours, they went through stances, footwork, and forms, and the boy proved to be a quick study. Quicker than most boys of an age much older than he was, and Jaime found himself impressed with the raw talent the lad possessed. "What's your name, lad?" he asked, and the boy's face suddenly darkened. Jon Snow, my lord," the boy said, and Jaime realized why he was being so hesitant. The boy was a bastard. But more than that, this was the boy that had stained the honorable cloak of Eddard Stark, and that was not an easy thing to live up or down to. "Well, you've got talent, young man. If you keep it up, you'll be an excellent swordsman one day," Jaime said, and the smile the boy gave him was blinding and familiar. No, it couldn't be, Jaime thought as he looked more closely at him. As before, though the boy quickly sloped away and Jaime was left standing there alone, wondering if he'd truly just seen a ghost, or if it was a trick of the light. The dreams came to him again that night as he slept in his bed, the bodies once again being placed before the throne. "I see no babes, only dragon spawn," the king said, almost reveling in the desecration in front of him. "Sir Jaime, have you seen Balerion?" the little girl asked. "Wah!" Mother said I'm not to let Balerion near Egg, but Egg wants to meet her. Look after my children. Sir Jaime, things will change when I return. A silver prince said, "Please, Sir Jaime, you have to help us away from here. My children and I aren't safe with Aerys," a princess said pleadingly. "Now, Egg, Mother says you're not allowed to play with Balerion, Sir Jaime. Sir Jaime, I found him. He was hiding all the time," the little girl said, laughing. The smile on her face was blinding as she showed off the cat in her arms. Jaime woke up in a cold sweat. It was the same smile. It was Rhaenys' smile. He got out of bed and threw some water on his face, the coldness a welcome respite from the thoughts that were running through his head. The boy was a Targaryen. He had to be, but how? Jaime began to play the events of the rebellion back in his head. Stark had left after arguing with the king. He had stood up for Elia and her children and had called it out for what it was, murder. Then he left to lift the siege at Storm's End. Then what? Damn it. Why couldn't he remember? He quickly got dressed. It was early, but perhaps breaking his fast would clear the confusion from his head and allow him to figure this out, or so he hoped. As he sat down to eat the honey-covered porridge, he smiled. Savages. The Northerners may be, but this was certainly the only dignified way to start the day in this cold land, each bite making him feel better. After he was finished eating, he went outside to the training area, a part of him hoping to see the boy again, though he knew it was too early and that he was alone. Jaime picked up a sword and began going through his motions, feeling the calmness come over him as he always did when he did this. After a few moments, he turned to put the sword back down when he noticed the boy. He'd been watching him for some time and was mimicking his movements as best he could, and it made him smile to see just how close he came to copying them precisely. "What brings you out so early, young man?" Jaime asked, the boy shooting him a surprised look at the sound of his voice. Nothing. My lord, I was just watching," the boy said nervously. "You were doing more than watching. You were copying and doing a damn good job of it," Jaime said, and the guilty look on the boy's face quickly became something different. Was that pride? It was. Good. He was right to feel pride. 6 name days old, and he was already showing more promise than boys twice his age. "My lord, those moves, why'd you do them?" the boy asked, and the question caught him off guard for a moment. "Why do you think?" he asked, watching as the boy pondered the question before answering. "Because the more you do them, the easier they are. Then doing them feel easy and it calms you down," the boy said, surprising Jaime that he had understood it so quickly. Jaime looked at the lad more keenly, closer than he had before, and he could see it clearly then. The shape of the nose, the cheekbones, the purple in the eyes when the light hit them a certain way, it all became clear. Jon Snow was Rhaegar's son, and that could only mean that Lyanna Stark was his mother. "Yes, lad, well done, that's exactly why. Would you like to practice some more with me?" he asked, and there it was, that blinding smile appearing on the boy's face once again. They practiced for a couple of hours, and at some point, the auburn-headed boy who was Stark's heir turned up. "What are you doing, Snow? That's the Kingslayer," the boy said, and Jaime grimaced. "Lord Jaime was teaching me swords. He's really good," Jon said, and Jaime found he couldn't help but smile at the earnest way he said it. "Whatever," the heir said dismissively as he turned around and headed back towards the keep. "Don't mind him. He's not a morning person," Jon said as he turned to face him. The boy was still smiling as they continued their moves and even began to have a mock spar. Later on, after they had parted, Jaime went back and sat in his room, his thoughts focused only on Jon Snow and the rebellion. Stark had broken the siege at Storm's End and had then gone to Dorne. He returned with his sister's body and a babe he named his bastard. No one had questioned it, because if the great and honorable Ned Stark was claiming a stain on his damnable honor, then it must be true. But what had really happened? Was the boy even a bastard? He needed to know, and Jaime knew that he had no other choice. He needed to go and speak with Eddard Stark. Mind made up, he left his room and headed towards the Great Hall. While he was on his way there, he heard a raised voice, and so he stopped to listen. "Boy, what were you doing with Lord Jaime? A bastard like you shouldn't be near their betters. I'll not have shame brought upon my family by the likes of you," the woman said, and Jaime could hear the sniffles as if he was standing right beside the boy. "From now on, I don't want to see you anywhere near any of the noble lords. It's enough. I am forced to tolerate your presence. I won't inflict it upon those better than you." "By the Seven, what would they think of us?" the woman said as she turned to walk away before Jaime managed to round the corner. Jon sat there on the ground with tears rolling down his face, and as much as he wanted to go to him, Jaime knew that he'd be embarrassed to be found in such a state. "I'm sorry, I won't do it again," Jon said between his sniffles, and Jaime found that he was suddenly very angry and annoyed about the boy's treatment. He turned away to go and look for Stark and hoped he kept his temper in check. It took him almost the entire rest of the day to get a moment to talk to Stark, as it seemed that he and the king were practically joined at the hip. Jaime had always heard that Lyanna was the great love of the king's life, but the more he saw of him and Stark together, the more he thought that perhaps Eddard was the Stark that Robert truly loved. Finally, he found the man alone, and so he moved to speak to him. "Lord Stark, may I have a moment of your time when you're ready?" he asked, as Stark looked at him with his annoyance clear in his face. "I'm very busy, Lord Lannister," Stark said, and Jaime had to resist the urge to call him out for his kissing of the king's arse, though he supposed in its own way that was busy work, as Robert was now a far larger man than he had once been. "I wish to speak with you about your son," Jaime said. And Stark's annoyance turned to confusion now. "Robb, why would you want to speak to me about Robb?" Stark asked, and Jaime almost laughed, as of course he'd think it was the heir he wished to speak on. Especially considering he was his only son, if Jaime was as right as he now believed himself to be. "No, not Robb. I wish to speak about Jon," he said, and he watched as the color drained from Stark's face. "Very well. How about we meet in my solar in an hour, Lord Lannister?" Stark asked, and Jaime agreed before he turned and walked away. When he headed to the solar to meet with Stark, he was determined in his course of action. Rhaegar's son didn't belong here. Bastard or not, he deserved better than to be belittled by a stepmother that hated his very existence. He deserved better than to grow up meek and mild. The boy had talent, but he'd never be allowed to hone it here, nor would he ever be allowed to be anything other than a bastard. Jaime felt he had failed Rhaegar once. He'd not do so again. As he reached the solar, he noticed the guards outside. Was Stark worried about something? Was he afraid that Jaime would out his secret? Good. Let him be afraid. That'd make what he wanted to do far easier. "Lord Stark, Lord Jaime is here to see you," a guard said as he opened the door before Jaime heard Stark invite him inside. The man motioned to the seat and offered him a mug of ale, and a part of him was almost worried that he'd poison him if he knew what Jaime really knew. Though he figured that guest right was way too important to Stark's honor for even that, and so he accepted the ale that was offered and sat down. "My wife has told me that Jon has been hanging around you. Lord Jaime, I'll see to it that he doesn't bother you again. I've already spoken to." Jaime quickly put his glass down and shook his head. "Gods, were these people really that dumbs?" he thought as he looked to Stark and interrupted him. "You misunderstand me, Lord Stark. I'm not here because the boy was bothering me. Quite the opposite, in fact. I'm here because I want the boy to be my page, and then for him to squire for me. I want to give the boy a chance to earn a knighthood." He saw how Stark looked at him with a mixture of shock and horror on his face, the man reaching down and picking up his mug of ale and emptying it in one swallow. "Excuse me, but what?" Stark said, and Jaime looked at him to see there was curiosity in his eyes, as if he was trying to judge the reasoning for his request. "I said I want the boy to earn a knighthood. He's very talented, and under the right tutelage he could be an incredible swordsman, and so I wish to train him," he said, as Stark looked at him dumbfounded and then angrily. "No," Stark said firmly. "Why not?" he asked curiously. "Ooh. Jon is of the north, and we don't care for knighthoods here," Stark said almost snippily. "Really? Isn't your master of arms a knight, and didn't Jorah Mormont get knighted by the king himself? Don't the Manderlys have knights in their family, or are they not Northmen?" he asked while trying not to smirk. "That's different. They're not Starks," Stark said dismissively. "Neither is Jon," he replied in the same tone. "How dare you? He may be a bastard, but he is my son," Stark growled, the man's anger clear now as he glared at him. "Is he?" Stark looked at him as if he wanted to kill him. His face was red with rage, and then he stood up and gripped the table, looking Jaime directly in his eyes. "He is my blood," Stark said, gritting his teeth. "He is? But he's not your son," Jaime said. And though the man's anger rose, the panic in his eyes was clear too. "Get out!" Stark shouted. The two guards rushed in upon hearing their lord's raised voice, their hands on their swords as they looked at them both, and Jaime especially, as he just sat there. Both of them were just waiting for the word from their liege to strike Jaime down. Not that they would have been able to, but they were ready to try all the same. "Lord Stark, we should finish this conversation in private rather than have others know of what truths we speak." Stark looked at him, then at the guards, before looking at him again and then sighing. "That'll be all, lads. Move to the end of the corridor and make sure we're not disturbed." "Are you sure, my lord?" the larger of the guards asked, and Stark nodded at the smaller one before they both took their leave. "What do you know?" Stark asked, as soon as he was sure the guards were out of earshot. "I know that Jon is Rhaegar's bastard with Lyanna," Jaime said. "He's true-born," Stark said, shocking him. What? "They were married in front of our gods on the Isle of Faces and in the Light of the Seven at a small sept near Harrenhal. Jon is true-born," he asked, as he tried not to lose his temper. "Aye, you raised the rightful heir to the throne as a bastard?" He asked, his voice calm, and yet he felt anything but. "Robert is king," Stark said determinedly. "Jon is king. And you raised him as a bastard so your fat friend could sit on his throne," he said angrily, his voice rising ever so slightly. Yet his tone was clear. "I protected him, as was my sister's wish," Stark replied, far more defensively than firmly Jaime thought. "You protected your friend, and let your nephew suffer because of it," he said, practically shouting now. He saw how Stark now looked at him with guilt in his eyes, and Jaime felt the anger seep out of him. Rhaegar's son, his true-born son, had been raised as a bastard, but he was alive. In this way, Stark had done something that he had not. He'd saved Rhaegar's child, and for that, Jaime was grateful. "What are your plans for Jon, Lord Stark?" "Aye. You have none. You won't legitimize him or give him his own keep. So, what? Have him be a guard, a master of arms, or will you ship him off to the Night's Watch?" "The Night's Watch is an honorable calling for a bastard," Stark said softly. "But Jon is not a bastard, is he? He's true-born. He was born a king, and you'd send him to a damn penal colony. Why?" he asked. And he was glad his voice didn't betray the anger that was rising again. "He'd be protected there. He'd be no threat to Robert if he took his vows," Stark said almost pleadingly. "You'd damn your nephew to protect that fat fool. You'd let Rhaegar's line die with him. That's how you repay your promise to your sister." He said his disdain for both Robert and for what Stark suggested very clear in his words and his expression. Aye. Let the boy come with me. I'll train him and knight him when he's ready." "And why would you do this?" Stark asked curiously. "Gah, I made a promise too. Lord Stark, a promise that I failed to keep, but now I have the chance to. Let the boy come with me. Let me give him the future that you could not." He felt that Stark looked drained, Jaime looking at him as he filled his mug up once more and swallowed it again in one swoop. Finally, Stark looked up at him with resignation and what was perhaps even gratitude in his eyes. "Aye," Stark said after a few moments, and Jaime felt his heart beat a little faster. He nodded and then stood up and left the solar, feeling much lighter than he had in years. He'd been given a second chance, a chance to right the wrongs his father had done, to right the wrongs he had done. He vowed he would train Jon and help him however he could. He swore that when the time was right, he'd put him where he belonged, on the throne that was rightfully his. Ned tossed and turned for most of the night, sleep hard to find. He eventually gave up and got out of bed quietly so as not to wake. Cat, he dressed and went to the one place where he always found peace, the Godswood. As he knelt before the weirwood tree, he thought over what had happened, what he had agreed to. Was he breaking his promise, or as Jaime Lannister had accused him, had he already done so? How would his sister see it? "Liar, have I failed your boy?" His voice softly carried in the night. He sat there for hours, the cold not bothering him, so lost he was in his thoughts. Jaime offered Jon something he couldn't, or was that wouldn't, the feeling of shame at some of what he'd been accused of, too hard to shake off. Had he protected Robert more than he had Jon? He knew. Cat had never accepted the boy, and while she had never been physically abusive, she had made it clear what he was and that he was not the same as her children, my children. Have I done the same? Have I treated him as my son? The simple answer was, he hadn't, and the thought of it broke his heart. Ned resolved to do better. Jon would have a better life with Jaime away from Cat's disdain and from being reminded constantly that he was a bastard. He'd have a chance at a future, and if come the day the truth outed, then Ned would be there for him. He left the Godswood and went to the only other place he felt peace, the crypts, walking past the statues until he found hers, the fierce little sister he loved so much. He looked up at the likeness. The sculptor had tried his best, but no statue could ever capture the light that shone in Lyanna. No sculptor was the face that haunted him most nights, and he smiled. "You'd be so proud of him, Leah." Kneeling down, he began to dig at the base of the statue, moving the dirt aside until he found what he was looking for. The box looked exactly as it had when he found it in the tower so many years earlier. The three-headed dragon entwined, holding a blue rose in its talons, wiping the dust from the wood, made the image come to life, as if it had just been painted yesterday. He opened the box and checked its contents. Once he was sure they were all there. He moved behind the statue and opened the base to find the other object, long and slim and wrapped in a sheet. He took it and the box and headed back inside. Jon woke up earlier than usual. He quickly dressed and left the room, figuring he'd have a little time to train before breaking his fast. As he walked towards the training area, he saw a figure enter through the opposite door, moving closer. He saw it was his father, carrying something in his hands. He almost shouted out a hello until he saw his father's face, which made him reconsider. His father looked as if the last thing he wanted was to be spoken to, so Jon left him be and continued on his way. Jaime could get addicted to porridge and honey. What had started, firstly as a warm meal to break his fast on these cold northern mornings, had quickly become something he would make sure would be served in Casterly Rock from now on. He decided to have a second bowl, and as he motioned to the serving girl to bring it in, he saw Jon enter the room, sweat running down his brow. He looked as if he'd been training yet again. Jaime admired his dedication. Not every young lad would put in a training session before breaking their fast. He motioned the young lad over, deciding he'd like some company while eating the second bowl of porridge, and besides, the boy would no doubt eat on his own otherwise. Lord Jaime. "Sit down, lad. Break your fast with me." Jon looked pensively at him before looking around the room. After a moment, and obviously finding whatever it was he wanted to find, he sat down. "Were you out training again, lad?" "Aye, Lord Jaime, I was." "Good lad. The more you apply yourself, the better you'll become. In no time at all, you'll be taking victories from everyone, even from me." Jon smiled a full smile at him before shaking his head. "I doubt that, my lord. Everyone knows you're the best swordsman in Westeros. Not even Sir Barristan can beat you. I've no chance." "True, lad. Right now you've no chance, but mark my words, one day you'll be taking victories from me and everyone else. Then you'll be the best swordsman in Westeros." Jon looked at him with awe, the smile on his face even bigger than before. Jaime nudged him on the shoulder, making him laugh out loud as the serving girl brought the porridge and Jon's plate filled with sausages and bacon. The two of them tucked in, talking and laughing with each other as they ate. And then Gerion came in, his breeches around his legs, shouting, "Where is the little sod?" Jon was curled over, tears falling from his face as Jaime shared stories of the adventures he and Tyrion got up growing up in the Rock. Jaime, too, couldn't stop himself from laughing as he looked at the boy. He turned to drink some of the warm milk he washed his porridge down with, and when he turned back to Jon, he saw the laughter had stopped, the smile had disappeared, and instead Jon was looking down at his empty plate, a look of worry on his face. Jaime wondered what had happened to change the mood so quickly. Looking around, he saw Ned and Cat enter the hall, the scowl on the Trout's face quickly explaining Jon's sudden mood change. "Don't worry, lad. Soon you won't have to deal with her pettiness anymore." Later that day, Jaime headed to Ned's solar. Stark wanted to see him before they told Jon about Jaime's offer. He walked past the guard who opened the door as he got there. Clearly, he was expected. "Sit down, Lord Jaime. There are things we need to discuss." Jaime took the offered seat, worried that perhaps Stark was going to backtrack. Perhaps he was going to call his bluff. Jaime had admitted he cared for Jon's welfare. Had he said too much? Was Stark now sure he'd never reveal the secret and was going to refuse to allow Jon to leave? "Before I speak to Jon, there are some things we should clear up." "Very well, Lord Stark. Call me Ned. This lord nonsense gets tiring when it's only the two of us speaking." "First name status, aren't I special?" Jaime quipped. "Damn it, Lannister, I'm trying to be civil." "Very well then, Ned," the smirk still on his face, clearly annoying Stark. "There are things that belong to Jon. Things his mother kept for him. Things I may not have ever given him if we hadn't spoken." "What things?" "I never meant for Jon to be treated differently. It was never meant to be like this." "Ah, confession time." "Is it, Lord Stark? Very well. Confess away." "I'll listen, if I must." Just as long as this leads to me leaving with Rhaegar's son, I'll put up with your inane drivel if that's the price. At first, it helped the story. What woman would love her husband's bastard? It was to be expected that she'd be distant. Even that she may be mean to the lad. Oh, she'd never touch a hair on his head, but I let it go on because it kept him safe. Jaime sighed. But I suppose I never thought how badly it'd affect Jon. Of course you didn't. What you said you was right. I put Robert's reign over my nephew. I did it to protect Jon, but you're right. I did it for Robert as well. I still think it's too dangerous for Jon to make a claim, but it should never be my decision to make once I decided not to claim for him. Ned stood from the table and walked to the back of the room. He returned carrying a box and something wrapped in a sheet, laying them out on the table. He looked at Jaime and pointed towards them. Jon's birthright! Jaime looked from the table to Ned. After receiving a nod, he reached over and opened the box. Inside, he found some papers, a piece of material wrapped around a round object, and a golden harp. Is this? It is. This is Rhaegar's harp. Aye, it is. Jaime looked at the harp with reverence on his face. No one who knew Rhaegar could forget the times he played that harp. The sounds he was able to get from it were otherworldly, his hands shaking. He lifted it up, the strings still as tight as they ever were. He carefully put it back down and picked up the papers. A marriage certificate between Rhaegar and Lyanna, signed by the Septon and witnessed by Sir Arthur and Sir Oswell, as well as a notice of annulment between Rhaegar and Elia, signed by them both. There's also a letter from Elia to her brothers explaining her choice. Jaime was stunned. Stark had all the evidence which proved that the rebellion was built on a lie. If Robert ever found out he'd lose his head, then Stark would lose his. The other two are Jon's birth announcements, one for a girl and one for a boy. They hadn't been sure, so they went with both. Jaime looked at the documents. We hereby announce the birth of our son, Jaehaerys Targaryen, second in line to the throne after his brother Aegon. Signed by his parents, Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Targaryen, witnessed by Sir Gerald Hightower, Sir Oswell Went, Sir Arthur Dayne. The other document was pretty much the same, except for it being for a Visenya. Jaime placed the documents back in the box and took the material-wrapped object in his hand. The heaviness of it surprised him, and he looked up to see Stark wipe a tear from his eye. Liar's maiden cloak. Jaime nodded, understanding how difficult it must be for Ned to look at the cloak. Given what happened, he unwrapped it and almost dropped what it was covering. He had never seen one before, never even knew anyone who had. But it was clear as day. He was holding a dragon egg. The white swirls with flecks of blue shone in the small solar, and Jaime turned it over and over, looking at it in amazement. As he did, he noticed a small letter fall from the beneath where the cloak had covered the egg. He looked at it, and at Stark. What's this? I don't know, I've never seen it before. He picked up the letter and saw one word written on it. Jaehaerys. He handed it to Ned, who looked at it before smiling. Liar's handwriting. They looked at each other, coming to a silent conclusion. This was not for them. It was Jon's between him and his mother, and they would leave it to him to open it eventually. Jaime wrapped the egg back in the cloak, placing both things back into the box. He made sure he got everything inside before closing the lid. Then he looked at Ned, who was handing him the final object, something long and skinny and wrapped in a sheet. Wait. No, that wasn't a sheet, that was a banner, a specific banner. That was Rhaegar's personal banner. The three-headed dragon holding a sword in one talon and a harp in the other. Taking the object from Ned, he unwrapped it quickly, excitement building in his chest based on what he'd found so far. He almost dropped it when he uncovered it. This can't be it is though, isn't it? Aye, that's Dark's sister all right. How? Where? How? Was first to him something. Jon was worried. He'd been caught again. The first time Lady Catelyn had made it clear he was to keep away from nobles like Lord Jaime. But the thing was, Jaime wasn't like other noble lords. He was different. He didn't look down on Jon like they did. He talked to him, listened to him. He even sparred and trained with him. When Jon was with Jaime, he didn't feel like a bastard. He felt like a true-born son. He felt the way he thought Robb must feel when lords speak to him, when they compliment him. No one ever bothered to make Jon feel like that, but now he had ruined it. He'd been warned and got caught, and now his father wanted to see him. Jon hated disappointing his father more than anything in the world, and now he'd done it twice in 2 days. Here you go, lad. Your father's waiting for you inside, Sir Roderick said as he motioned for him to enter the solar. Ah, Jon, good. Take a seat, lad. Jon looked around the solar nervously. Lady Catelyn sat beside his father, her face in what Jon thought was a permanent scowl. Or, no, that's not true. She smiles sometimes, just never at me. Jon fidgeted in his seat, the worry starting to rush over him. If Lady Catelyn was here, then it was serious. Whatever excuse Jon gave, she was sure to ignore or shout down. Jon was in trouble, and he knew it. Sorry, Lord Stark, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. Hush, lad, you're not in trouble, far from it. Jon looked at his father in confusion. If he wasn't in trouble, then why was he asked to come here? Why was Lady Catelyn here? Jon, Lord Jaime has come to me with a proposal, an offer for your future. He wishes to take you on as a page and then as a squire. He wants you to earn your knighthood with him. Jon felt his heart swell. A knighthood, he had never imagined such a thing. He looked at his father's smiling face and then to Lady Catelyn's, whose expression had changed into one he knew all too well, disgust. Aye, lad, he says he sees great potential in you, that you have it in you to be a great swordsman one day. Lady Catelyn scoffed and his father shot her a reproving look. Jon couldn't believe what he heard. Him, a great swordsman. Jaime had said it to him before, but he figured he was just being nice. But no, he said it to his father too and wanted him to be a knight, so it must be true, mustn't it? It'll mean you leaving Winterfell, though. You'd have to travel back with Lord Jaime when he departs, so you can take up your duties. Jon looked between his father and Lady Catelyn again, the words entering his head as he noticed the expressions on both their faces. His father looked sad while Lady Catelyn had a smile on her face. That's it! That's how she's punishing me! She's forced father to make me leave, and he convinced Jaime to take pity on his bastard! Jon jumped up from the seat, tears running down his face, and ran to his room. Jon! What's wrong, lad? But the words were missed to him as he ran towards his room. Gone! They want me gone! What have I done? Why do they hate me? He slammed the door shut behind him and fell onto the bed, his tears flowing freely. It took a few moments, but it felt like hours before Jon heard the knocking at his door. He knew it was his father, and as much as he wanted to keep his door shut, he knew he had no choice, so he wiped his face and got up to open the door. He was right. There was his father, a worried look on his face. Lad, what's wrong? Talk to me. Why are you throwing me out? Father, I don't want to go. I want to stay here. Please don't let them take me away. Ned looked at the tear-stricken face of his nephew. He could hear the sniffles in his voice as he spoke. Had he messed even this up? Could he do nothing right? Jon, I'm not, and will never throw you out. You hear me? Winterfell is your home. It's yours for as long as you want it to be. You mean it. Aye, lad. Of course I mean it. Jon threw his arms around his father, and for the first time almost since he was born, Ned hugged his nephew. He felt him relax against him, and felt the sniffling begin to subside. So he decided now was the time to speak to him like he should have in the first place. Having Cat there had been a mistake. He saw that now, but he thought the idea would have pleased Jon. Had he misread things, he needed to find out. Jon, the offer from Lord Jaime is real. He felt his nephew stiffen against him. He really does think you have the potential to be a knight and would like the chance to train you. This isn't about throwing you out. This is a real opportunity for you, Jon. But if it's not what you want, then that's fine. I only want what's best for you. But I'd have to leave, wouldn't I? Aye, you would, lad. But it wouldn't have to be gone forever. You could come back and visit. And when you're a knight, you could come back for good, if you want. It's up to you, lad. Ned helped him over to the bed, settling him down. He gave him his warmest smile. Pleased to see Jon return it, he tucked him in and ruffled his hair, getting a small pout that reminded him so much of his mother. It hurt. He sat down on the bed beside him. Listen, why don't you sleep on it? Och, have a word with Lord Jaime in the morning and then decide what you want. If you want to go for it, then do it, and if you want to stay, then do that. No one will force you to do anything you don't want. Jon, I promise you. Ned shuddered softly as the words left his lips. Hopefully he could keep this promise better than the last one. Jon nodded and shut his eyes, the events clearly taking a toll on him, so Ned got up and walked to the door. Looking back, he could see his nephew was already fast asleep. Jon woke up feeling much better. He didn't have to leave if he didn't want to, but did he want to? That was something he wasn't sure about. To become a knight, have a future. He dreamed of those things, to be away from Winterfell, from Robb, Sansa, little Arya and his father. That was the stuff of nightmares. But Winterfell also meant Lady Catelyn. She hated him. She would always hate him. And while his father said he didn't have to leave, she made it hard to want to stay. He needed to talk to Lord Jaime. He needed to know that he wasn't being offered this chance because of pity. If he really did believe in him, then perhaps leaving wasn't so scary. Jaime was nowhere to be found. Had he left already? Did he miss his chance? What would he do if he had left? Jon felt as if he'd messed up completely. If he'd just said yes when his father told him he could have left with him. Instead, he let himself cry like a baby. He was about to do so again. He could feel the tears welling in his eyes. So there you are. He turned around to see Lord Jaime staring at him intently. Relief filled his heart when he realized he had another chance to take his offer, but the little voice in his head reminded him that it may be because he pitied him. "Aye, you oak lad. Father told me that you may am. Ah, he told you about my offer to have you be my page, did he? Yeah, he said you thought I could be a knight. Not just any knight, lad, a true knight like Sir Arthur Dayne or Aemon the Dragon Knight." Jon was stunned. Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, Aemon the Dragon Knight. These weren't just knights, these were legends. Sir Arthur was the greatest swordsman that ever lived, and Aemon was the noblest knight ever. But I'm a bastard. Is your heart less pure than a true-born son? Jon, is your skill lesser because of your name? You think I have skill. Everything I've said to you since I've been here, Jon, has been true, so listen to me now. I've never seen anyone as skilled as you are at your age. Even those who have years on you are less skilled than you. So, young man, what do you say? Do you have it in you to prove them all wrong? To show that you're not just good, but that you can be better than all of them? Will you be my page, Jon Snow? Jon looked at him. He saw the truth in his eyes. He meant it. It wasn't pity or trying to find favor with his father. He was the White Lion of Car. He wanted to train Jon because he saw something in him, something he wanted to polish and hone, something he saw in no one else. For the first time, Jon felt a sense of pride overwhelm him. "Aye, my lord, it'd be an honor." "Of course it would," Jaime replied before the two started laughing. Earlier that day, Jon and Robb had said their goodbyes. Tears shared between them, but both swore to write, and Jon promised to return as soon as he was able. They hugged, and Jon went to say goodbye to the rest of his siblings. He walked to the nursery, where little Arya would hopefully be awake. He wanted to look into her eyes as he said goodbye rather than say the words to a sleeping child. Luckily for him, Arya was an active baby. She'd grow to be a wild little wolf, he thought as he approached the crib. "Hello, little one. It's your big brother Jon. I love you, little sister, so much. Please don't forget me. I won't forget you." He looked at the babe with tears in his eyes. Young as he was, he knew it was hopeless. The chance that she'd remember him was pretty much naught. He doubted even that his name would be spoken if Lady Catelyn got her way. He almost ran from the nursery, his emotions getting the better of him. Sansa was, as usual, by her mother's side, with Septa Mordane hovering in the background like she always did. Jon nervously approached, the scowl on Lady Catelyn's face easy to read, as always. He didn't even need to look at her to know she wore that scowl. It was her go-to expression when he was around. "What do you want, boy?" I came to say goodbye to my sister." Catelyn glared at him, pulling Sansa tighter to her. "Do it and be gone." He approached as closely as he dared and looked down at the little red-haired angel that was his sister. She smiled at him and then frowned. He noticed that her mother had almost yanked her back when she saw the smile on her face. "Sansa, I came to say goodbye." "No, you stay." "I can't, Sansa." "I can't, Sansa. I'm going to be a knight. I'm going to miss you, sister." He watched as the little girl nodded before running over to give him a hug, tears filling his eyes as she gripped him tightly. Before he could even begin to let go, though Lady Catelyn was pulling her daughter from his arms, her face a mixture of hate and disgust that Jon knew only too well. "Very well, boy. You've said your goodbyes. Now go." She turned with Sansa in her arms and walked back to the scepter, both women looking satisfied that the bastard would no longer be around to corrupt her precious children. He left the room as quickly as he could without running from it, heading straight to the one place he could be alone and not be bothered, the crypts. It was there later that Jaime found him crying in front of the statue of his aunt. Jaime shook his head, clearing the memory as he turned to see Jon looking back at the castle with a last look. "Come, Jon. The rock awaits, and we have a long way ahead of us." A few weeks later, weeks had flown in. He'd seen places he'd only ever heard about in conversations around Winterfell. They had followed the King's Road and stopped for a night at Castle Selwyn. It was there they and the King's retinue had parted ways, as Jaime said they moved too slow for him, although Jon got the feeling that he really just didn't like the King. The Selwyns had thrown a feast to celebrate having the King in their castle, and as usual the King had enjoyed himself to the fullest. Jon sat at the back, stunned that Jaime sat with him rather than at the high table with the King, although given how the King behaved, it shouldn't have been that surprising. "You boy, the King wishes to speak to you," the stern Merentrant said as he tugged on his shoulder. "What does he want?" Jaime asked, annoyed by the presence of his former brother. "He wants to speak to the bastard Kingslayer." Fauntaunteth in the hall were upon him. "Ah, let me get a look at you, boy. Aye, you're Ned's bastard all right, off to be a knight, are you? Hopefully your grace. Kingslayer, where are you? Get up here." Jaime left his seat and reluctantly walked to the front of the hall. A small part of him had worried that the King might recognize someone other than Stark in the boy, but the King saw what he wanted to, and, besides the way he was eyeing the bosom of the serving girl, probably had his mind on other things. "Yes, your grace. So gonna make a knight out of Ned's boy, are you, Kingslayer?" "Undoubtedly, your grace, the boy is talented. Just like his father, then. Indeed, your grace, very much so." "Boy, did you know your father slew Sir Arthur Dayne, killed the damned Sword of the Morning in single combat? By the gods, what I'd have given to see that fight." Jaime grimaced at the King's words. There was no way in hell Stark could defeat Arthur, not in single combat, not with numbers on his side. How it had happened he didn't know, but there had to be trickery or underhandedness involved, although given Ned Stark's precious honor, he wasn't sure how that could be. "You'll be just as good, no doubt, won't you, boy?" "I hope so, your grace. Humble, just like your old man. A fine knight you'll be." The rest of the night passed quickly, and they had moved on the next morning. They had seen the mighty moat Caelin, and despite it being in disrepair, Jon could see why no one had ever taken the fortress. They passed through the neck, and Jon was delighted to see lizard lions swimming in the swamp. Although he had made sure not to get too close, he liked his fingers too much. Their travels had gone smoothly, and Jaime had taken the time to speak to him and spar with him. He called him his page. But most of his duties seemed to be those of a squire. Although the armor was too heavy and hard to lift, he still did his best and kept it clean, enjoying the words of praise he received from Jaime for doing so. His favorite times, though, were the stories Jaime would tell after they'd finished sparring. Sir Arthur faced down the Smiling Knight, their two swords moving faster and faster, and then with a loud crash the Smiling Knight's sword broke. Arthur, chivalrous as ever, paused the fight and allowed him to pick up another sword. "It's you, sword, I want, Sir Arthur," the Smiling Knight said, pointing at Dawn. "Then you shall have it, sir," Arthur replied. The two blades clashed again and again. The knight was skilled, but Arthur was an artist, the finest swordsman I've ever seen, perhaps the greatest ever. It was inevitable he would win, and win he did, slaying the Smiling Knight and bringing to an end the Kingswood Brotherhood. "He knighted. You didn't, my lord." "Aye, that he did, lad. Proudest day of my life was being knighted by the Sword of the Morning, the finest knight, the finest man I ever knew." Jaime told Jon more stories as they traveled. He told him of Sir Barristan defeating Maelys, the monstrous ending the Blackfire line. He told him of the rogue prince jumping from his dragon, Caraxes to slay Aemond above the God's Eye. But it was the tales of Aemon. The Dragon Knight that caught Jon's attention the most, a true knight and Kingsguard. Things continued along in this vein as they passed through the Twins. Jon shuddered as he remembered Jaime dealing with Walder Frey and the toll they had to pay to pass. Finally, they reached Seaguard, where they would take a ship to Lannisport. The Lannisters were surprisingly welcome, considering they were Tully bannermen, and he was the bane of their liege lord's daughter's life. "My lord, why are we taking a ship?" he asked as they waited in a tavern near the docks. "I've been away too long, and it'll be moons more if we travel overland. From here, though, a ship will have us in Lannisport within the moon, and it's just a short ride to the Rock from there." What's the rock like, my lord? Ah, how to explain it? It's unlike any castle in Westeros, and I've missed it more than I thought I would. But as for the rest, my boy, well, you're going to have to wait until we get there. Wouldn't want to ruin the surprise now, would we? He smirked, as Jon frowned at him. He ruffled his hair, forcing a smile, and then nudged his shoulder, nearly forcing him to fall to finally get a laugh from him. The time spent on the ship was something he wished he could forget. He wasn't built for sea travel, and Jaime took great pleasure in doing his best to rub it in, although given how sick he got, he stopped after a while and became concerned for him. It was different for Jon to have someone look after him and worry as much as Jaime did. He brought the cold water and towels to place on Jon's head himself, and even though Jon really didn't want to eat, Jaime made sure he got some food in his stomach every day. When they eventually reached Lannisport, he could have kissed the ground. He resolved to never set foot on a ship again if he could help it, but knew that it was likely to be necessary sometime. Lannisport was incredible to see, especially for a boy who thought Wintertown was large. The streets were paved, and the amount of people was mind-blowing. As he walked with Jaime, they were often forced to stop as people addressed the new shield of Lannisport, just one of the many titles Jaime now held. "Good afternoon, my lord. Pleased to see you, my lord. Best of health to you. Sir Jaime, I mean my lord." Jaime nodded and smiled where appropriate, but just like he could see the frown on Jon's face. He too was tired of the delays that these niceties caused. He was happy when they finally reached the escort that his uncle Kevin had sent, even more pleased to see Sir Adam was there, but even more pleased to see his uncle Gerion leading it. "Finally, the lion returns," his uncle said, his usual sarcasm evident. "Aye, looks like I came just in time, uncle. Why, you're looking positively dreadful." "Little Joy has been unwell. I'm sorry to hear it, uncle." "Well, never mind. It's good to have you back, my lord." He shook his head as his uncle grabbed him in an embrace. If even Gerion was being formal, this was going to be a nightmare. He turned to Jon, who was standing there quietly, taking it all in, looking around at the strange city and stranger people. Well, Gerion was strange. Adam, not so much. He looked overawed. "Uncle, may I introduce my new page and soon-to-be squire?" "Ah, so that's who the lad is. Been wondering that since I got here, has the look of a northerner. What's your name, lad?" Gerion asked as Jon stepped forward. Jon Snow, my lord," Jon said nervously. "Well, young Master Snow, don't let this one overwork you." He bent down to whisper in his ear. He wasn't a very good page himself. "You know, don't let him fool ya." He laughed as he patted the boy on the shoulder. "Well, shall we? Your brother is waiting, as are your uncles. Be aware, though the new Lord of Casterly Rock needs to be presented, so it'll be a bit of palaver. Never let it be said we Lannisters are subtle or unassuming," his uncle said before laughing loudly. "Now where the hell did I leave my damn horse?" Jaime smiled. It was good to be back, good to see his uncle again. If there was one thing he knew, with Gerion around, things wouldn't be dull. They walked to their horses and began the trek to Casterly Rock. He was pleased to see Adam talking to Jon, who looked enraptured listening to him. God knows what tales he'd tell the boy. But still, it was nice of his to take the time. "That's Ned Stark's bastard, isn't it?" "Aye, it is, uncle." "How in the hell did you get Ned Stark to let you take his bastard as a page? Actually, scratch that. Why in the hell did you take him as a page? Actually, never mind, I don't want to know, just tell me this. How are you going to explain it to Kevin and the lords that you have a bastard as a page?" "I'm the warden of the West, uncle. My days explaining are over." Finally, they crested the small hill where he knew they see the castle for the first time. He motioned to Adam to send Jon over. As the boy rode towards him, he smiled. This is it. This is where it begins. This is where he fulfills his promise. And God help anyone. Welcome to the Rock.